What's going on, guys? Today in this video, it's going to be a good one. I'm really excited about it. We're going to be talking about all the kind of exciting to me things that's been going on with Twitter and Joe Rogan and Tim Pool and the podcasting community and the tech community kind of getting together and doing a bunch of interviews about social media unfairly targeting conservatives and liberals and kind of even independents. But we're about to get into that right now. All right, so a couple of days ago, Joe Rogan had on Tim Pool, Jack Dorsey, and Vijaya Gadde. So a little bit before that, Joe Rogan had on just Jack Dorsey, which I thought was a really a decent interview, kind of lackluster, but decent. I was surprised that Jack Dorsey was even on. So listening to the full thing gave me some insight, not just on him and on the beginnings of Twitter that I didn't really know about, but just kind of gives you an idea of his thought process and things like that. It actually, listening to it, even though it was kind of dry, he wasn't pushed on a lot of things, it kind of gave me a little bit of hope for Twitter. Then Tim Pool, who is an investigative journalist, a big following on YouTube, he did a video breaking down the interview and talking about how Joe Rogan wasn't strict enough or hard enough on Jack Dorsey on things that really mattered. Joe Rogan saw the video and called up Tim Pool to come in and talk to him. They had a separate podcast together where Tim Pool kind of ran through a lot of the things that have been happening with shadow banning and conservatives being banning for things that were pretty minor and, left-wing people, more intersectional people getting away with a lot more stuff on the platform. And there's a ton of information out there. I'm not going to jump into pretty much any of it. The point of this video is going to be breaking down basically my thoughts about Twitter and about the few interviews and podcasts that have been going on recently. So after Tim Pool and Joe Rogan had the interview, Joe Rogan wanted to do another follow-up with Tim Pool and have Jack Dorsey there. And Jack Dorsey knew that he didn't know enough, necessarily the nitty-gritty, so he had Vijaya come in. I don't remember her title, but she oversees, she's basically oversees the department that bans people. She is a lawyer. So just take that into account. And then a lot more of the story came out when Tim Pool went on Dave Ruben's podcast here on YouTube and talked a little bit more in depth about the four of them going at it. But let's get into my notes and my points on what I really thought about the whole thing. So my first point is, overall, I see all of this together as a good thing. We need more transparency with these big companies that we're continually engaging with through social media and stuff like that. Obviously, running a media company, running publications, running YouTube channels, Twitter and other social media are a huge part of that. So knowing as much as possible and knowing that just because you don't agree with the higher ups at a certain company doesn't mean that you're going to be necessarily targeted. So they made it sound like they're pretty open about everything. Even though there's still a lot of people with reservations on that because there are still a lot of huge gaps, and that's where we get into the next thing. So when Tim Pool was on Dave Rubin's show, he talked about how he felt like Jack Dorsey was a little bit more open to what he was saying. He felt like he didn't really know what was going on with a lot of these cases, and I completely saw that too. I saw that with the first interview with Jack Dorsey where he didn't really know exactly the details on a lot of these cases. Even Vijaya, when she chimed in on things, she knew about high profile cases. She knew about the ones that she researched, but she didn't even know about all of the cases, obviously, because there's so many people that have the potential of being banned. There's so many people on the platform. There's so many tweets, and they never did nail down how many total people they have in the department that can do this. That has their finger on the trigger. They say that's because they ramp up and ramp down depending on circumstances, which I completely understand. But it's still, if it's 40 to 100 people that have the power to do this, the potential for that power being abused is very high. So you can definitely tell that it doesn't just go up to the highest person and like Jack Dorsey or Vijaya has to sign off on this kind of stuff. It's things that people are doing that work for Twitter that you have no idea. They can catalog things, but once they delete the tweet, there's no real recourse. There's no proving yourself right. There's no fighting back with Twitter. And they even said it during the interview that these are their rules, basically live by them or get off their platform. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They're just getting off the platform. I remember a time, I've been on Twitter since 2007. The Texas Garage Twitter has 17,000 something, almost 18,000 followers. And I remember a time when Twitter used to be very engaging with talking to people, meeting people, getting your information out there, people engaging with that. Twitter has turned very political, and it's very difficult to have conversations with people on there and meet people like you used to. And then you always have to be worried about that one thing making mad the wrong person, or saying the one thing that that they're really just harping on at the moment, like saying hashtag learn to code. It's a joke to a lot of people. I'm also a coder. I'm a programmer. It would be a joke if I would tweet it out, and I could definitely have seen me tweet it out if I was even paying attention when all that was going on, and my account could have been banned, and then, you know, the Texas Garage account could have been banned. Who knows? Because they did also say that they have a lot of information on. They know if you have multiple accounts, and they can trace those and ban all of them at the same time. Another big thing that I noticed is that they're still not really admitting that they have a bias. They're not admitting that they have a bias, and what bias they do admit that they have. They're not admitting that it serves a role in the people that they ban. And this goes back to a political bubble. The one thing that stood out to me a lot in the first interview with Jack Dorsey was him talking about people being in a bubble. And you hear this a lot with conservatives are in this conservative bubble. They only watch Fox News. They only follow talk radio, and they're in this bubble and they don't hear anything about the outside world. But that's not really true. And it doesn't mean that liberals or leftists aren't in their own bubble as well. And they definitely are, and you can see that, especially with the elites at the top of big corporations like this. They're in their own bubble. They get their news and information from one source that's a source that they trust. And when they say jump, basically these people say how high. And the fact that they want other people to recognize their bubble, but they're not recognizing their own bubble, is a big part of all of this. And one of the last things that I kind of took away from all this is that I think Twitter has done something really smart business-wise, where they are gearing Twitter towards the media and towards news. They've found out that news people like to be on Twitter. They like breaking news on Twitter. It's a great way for independent journalists to get a name for themselves and get called onto these talk shows and stuff like that. And I think Twitter recognized this a few years ago and really started pushing news and pushing the narrative of these news people and really focusing their platform on catering to these journalists. That in of itself isn't a huge deal, except for the majority of journalists are left-wing and are pushing left-wing narratives. So again, it's part of being in that bubble. But I did want to say it is smart on Twitter's part, because that is why people go to Twitter. They don't go to Twitter nowadays to follow a celebrity or to do this or that. That's usually like Instagram now, or even some Facebook stuff with groups. But Twitter is where you go to find out what President Trump is tweeting. It's where you go to find breaking news on things. And I've heard it from a lot of people now. If they know something is happening or they see something, they don't go turn on the TV and find the news station. They go onto Twitter. They start looking at hashtags, what's trending. They start trying to figure out what's going on, and then they follow news cycles through Twitter. And again, I think Twitter recognized this a few years ago, and that's what they're catering to. So I don't think a lot of the leftist bias of Twitter is necessarily Twitter's fault or the people in Twitter. I think a lot of it has to do with the disingenuous media and the fact that our media is so far left-wing. All right, guys. Well, that's what I got for that. I hope you guys enjoyed my rant on all this. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more going on. Joe Rogan also did an interview with the one of the co-founders of Minds. I'm now on Minds because of that. There's going to be a lot more social medias pop up. Dave Ruben keeps hinting at the fact that him and Jordan Peterson are working on some kind of alternatives for social media. But yeah, again, running a media company, running YouTube channels, social media is a big deal for me. So I'll be keeping track of a lot of it, and I'll try to update you guys with rants as I do. Again, thanks for watching.